Nicolás Maduro and Cilia Flores Arraigned in New York, a historic and contentious court appearance. On Monday, January 5, 2026, former Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, appeared in a federal courtroom in Manhattan, New York, for their initial arraignment on multiple U.S. criminal charges, a development that could have profound political, legal, and diplomatic ramifications. How they got to New York. Maduro and Flores were captured on January 3, 2026, in a U.S. military operation at their residence in Caracas, Venezuela. U.S. forces removed them from power and transported them to the United States to face federal charges. Once in the U.S., they were held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, a federal detention facility, prior to their court appearance. What happened in court? Their arraignment took place at the Daniel Patrick Moynihan United States Courthouse in Lower Manhattan before U.S. District Judge Alvin Hellerstein. Both Maduro and Flores entered not guilty pleas to all charges brought in the federal indictment. Maduro, speaking through an interpreter, repeatedly proclaimed his innocence, calling himself a decent man, and insisting that he remains the legitimate president of Venezuela despite his capture. Flores, likewise through an interpreter, stated she was not guilty, completely innocent. Both were brought into courtroom handcuffed and wearing detention uniforms. They used headphones to follow proceedings in Spanish via court-provided interpreters. Flores appeared with a bandage and signs of injury, reportedly from the capture, and requested medical care. The hearing was short, mainly confirming identities, reading rights, and entering pleas. Judge Hellerstein made clear that bail would not be discussed today and noted additional legal proceedings. The indictment, unsealed shortly before the arraignment, accuses Maduro, Flores, and others, including Maduro's son and senior Venezuelan officials, of a series of serious crimes linked to narcotics trafficking and violence, narco-terrorism conspiracy, conspiracy to import cocaine into the United States, possession and conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. These charges relate to an alleged long-running scheme to ship thousands of tons of cocaine into the U.S. under the protection of Venezuelan government institutions. If convicted, defendants in this case could face life in prison under U.S. federal law. Maduro's statements, innocence, presidency, and capture. Maduro said, "I am innocent." At one point he declared himself a prisoner of war, framing his detention in political rather than purely criminal terms. Legal counsel signaled early that they may argue Maduro is entitled to head of state immunity, challenging the legality of his capture and prosecution, a complex issue in international and domestic law. The courthouse and surrounding streets were under heavy security, with law enforcement managing protests and counter-protests reflecting deep international divisions over the U.S. action. Judge Hellerstein scheduled the next court date for March 17, 2026, when preliminary proceedings and legal motions. Legal experts anticipate a lengthy and highly complex legal battle that will blend criminal procedure with sovereign immunity and how it applies to leaders accused of international crimes, international law norms around military capture and extradition. Analysts believe the case will echo far beyond Manhattan, potentially shifting patterns in how major powers pursue transnational criminal charges against political leaders. International law on sovereign immunity. U.S.-Venezuela relations and the question of pro-Maduro policy. Despite political hostility, oil trade continued. Venezuela remained a major crude supplier to the United States for years, creating a paradox: diplomatic confrontation alongside economic interdependence. After Chávez's death in 2013, Nicolás Maduro inherited both power and instability. The U.S. initially recognized his government but steadily imposed sanctions in response to. In 2019, the U.S. formally recognized opposition leader Juan Guaido as Venezuela's interim president. Following from that point forward, Washington's official position was that Maduro lacked democratic legitimacy. Despite refusing to recognize Maduro politically, the U.S. shifted to limited, pragmatic engagement, largely driven by global oil market disruptions after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, migration pressures across the Western Hemisphere, historical U.S. criminal charges against Nicolás Maduro. In March 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice unsealed sweeping indictments against Maduro and senior Venezuelan officials, accusing him of leading the so-called Cartel de los Soles, narco-terrorism conspiracy to import cocaine into the United States. U.S. prosecutors alleged that Maduro used drug trafficking as a tool of state power, both to enrich allies and to undermine U.S. institutions. The U.S. announced a reward of up to $15 million for information leading to Maduro's arrest, later adjusted under international law. Sitting heads of state generally enjoy immunity from foreign criminal jurisdiction. Applies to sitting heads of state, heads of government, and foreign ministers. Covers both official and private acts. Ends once the official leaves office. If the U.S. government does not recognize someone as head of state, courts may allow prosecution to proceed. That tension explains why actions against Maduro are viewed not just as legal steps, but as geopolitical events with consequences far beyond the courtroom.